A Port Authority fire truck.
Now, this happened just before midnight. 2 pilots were killed. Dozens of other people are injured. In this video from the scene showing the wrecked plane, nose tilted up to the sky. The crash truck is seen nearby.
Tragedy last night at LaGuardia Airport as Jazz 646 and Air Canada CRJ 900 collides with a fire truck at LaGuardia Airport on runway 4. All we know this so far is that both pilots were killed in that collision. One of the flight attendants was thrown clear of the airplane, at least according to early reports. The aircraft in question was a CRJ 900 en route from Montreal to LaGuardia. The incident takes place at about 11:45 at night at LaGuardia. I'm going to play the ATC audio for you here, and I'm going to allow it to play all the way through. Usually I stop and make comments. I'm not. Just a trigger warning, there's a collision here. You know that there's a death coming up, but I want you to listen to what takes place between the controller and the fire truck and the controller and the aircraft. And then I'll give you all the extenuating circumstances, because there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of things that were taking place behind the scenes that we didn't see listening to this. We'll come back, we'll circle back, and I'll unwrap all of that for you. But let's listen to what happened just last night at LaGuardia.
Truck 1 and Company, LaGuardia Tower.
Truck 1 and Company.
Truck 1 and Company, LaGuardia Tower, requesting to cross 4 at Delta.
Truck 1 and Company, cross 4 at Delta.
Truck 1 and Company, crossing 4 at Delta.
Frontier 4195, just stop there, please. Stop, truck 1, stop. Stop, truck 1, stop. Stop, truck 1, stop. Delta 603, going on runway heading 2000. Jazz 646. Jazz 646 is decoy, will be able to move position, I know you can't move. We're going to need to respond to you now.
Jazz 646 is the aircraft that collided with the fire truck, and this is a rather large fire truck, and so you can see the pictures of the damage done to the airplane just now, and it's extensive. The pilots were apparently killed instantly upon impact. The early reports is that the aircraft struck the fire truck at about 30 knots. That could be accurate. ADS-B data is notoriously inaccurate down on the ground. My guess is they were probably going a little bit faster than that when they struck this truck, but again, it's a very large truck. So again, a lot of impact, and aircraft aren't designed to take an impact like a car or a truck would be. Now, we don't know of any other fatalities. There are a number of other injuries, both on the aircraft and I'm assuming in this truck as well. So what were the extenuating circumstances that went into what was happening last night? Well, number one is this: it's the weather. Weather was not cooperating at LaGuardia last night. In fact, it was 6 statute miles of visibility and light rain and mist. And so think about when you're driving down a road at night, the poor visibility that you get when it's raining out or it's misty out. And airport runways are not lit like some freeways are lit. Sometimes there's lights over top of the freeway that illuminates the pavement in front of you. That's not the case on a runway. The runway lights are there to outline the edges of the runway, and then there's centerline lights, but they're actually embedded in the concrete. They're there just for the aircraft that's landing to see where the center line is. They're not there to illuminate the pavement and everything else around. So the lights that the aircraft has on are about it in terms of lighting. A truck like this is going to have the normal, rear lights, and it's going to have the headlights in the front, but sideways there's not going to be a lot of lights on the side of that truck. And given the fact that it was probably really poor visibility in the rain, I don't think that Jazz 646 saw this truck until maybe just the last second, and I don't think they could have even stopped then because of the wetness of the runway. The aircraft would slide on that runway. It would be much more difficult to bring the aircraft to a stop. The ceiling at LaGuardia last night was 800 to 1400 overcast. So it was a ragged ceiling, kind of like the waves of clouds that are moving through when there's a weather system going through. Broken layer at 800, so that would be the last hard layer at 800. So this aircraft probably broke out right around 800, 700 feet. They're looking down the runway, but they might not be able to see that far. And when they're cleared to land, They haven't cleared the truck onto the runway yet. The truck is still off the runway. So as the pilots are looking out, they see a clear runway as much as they can see in the rain, right? And they've been cleared to land by the tower. Now, Truck 1, which is the main fire truck at LaGuardia, calls, as they should, and asks for permission to cross runway 4 at Delta. Where is Delta exactly? Well, let me show you a schematic here or a diagram of LaGuardia Airport and where taxiway Delta is. So this is runway 4 right here at this end, the lower right hand of the diagram as we're looking at it. Jazz comes in to land on runway 4 and taxiway Delta is right here. It's between a third and a half of the way down the runway. It's not far down the runway. They would have touched down about the 2,000 foot mark on this runway. They would have been going really fast still at Delta. They would have expected to take the entirety of the runway to roll out. And I'm going to talk about runway 4 at LaGuardia in a minute because it's important. If you're ever based in LaGuardia or you're an experienced pilot that's flown into LaGuardia a lot, you know about runway 4 and what I'm going to say when we get to that point. Now, the visibility was at night, and it was somewhere between that highway I'm describing with all the overhead lights illuminating it and a 2-lane country road that's completely dark. Think about how kind of nerve-wracking that is when you're trying to drive down a 2-lane road at night and it's raining. It's not as bad as that, but it's not as good as a highway with the overhead lights. It's somewhere in between. So again, the visibility on the part of the truck is limited because they would have to be looking out the right-hand side. I don't know how many people were in the truck. Maybe it was only the driver. Maybe there wasn't anybody in the right-hand seat to look and to clear them. And again, these aren't experienced pilots in the truck. These are firemen. They're not trained to gauge distances of aircraft landing. And so this aircraft, once it was cleared to land, might have broken out shortly after that. And looking down, even if they did look at it, they're seeing lights out at a distance on a rainy night. So those lights out at a distance, it's hard to gauge how far away they are. And they're relying and trusting the tower to clear them onto the runway. So they're following the protocol that they're supposed to by calling the tower. Now, here's the other extenuating circumstance. They were talking on 2 different frequencies. The tower is talking to the airplane on one frequency, and he's talking to the fire truck on another. And again, this is a big issue in aviation. Why we're still talking on different frequencies, because the tower has not heard that there's an aircraft cleared to land. He's trusting the tower controller, who told him it was clear to cross the runway, that the runway is in fact clear. Jazz, who's landing and on short final, they're almost in the flare when this truck starts to cross the runway. They're trusting the tower that there's nobody in front of them, and they might not have seen that fire truck down there at Delta. And at that point, once they touch down, it's impossible for them to go around because if they went around and they hit the power, they still need a bunch of runway to lift off again. It would be well past the truck. So they've got to stop before Delta, which is impossible. I can tell you that. It's not possible on a rainy night to stop before Delta taxiway at LaGuardia. They're doomed to strike something if it's still on the runway at LaGuardia. Now, you heard the air traffic controller's voice. He sees what's happening. He calls out to the fire truck. He says, "Truck 1, stop, 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 stop." But he said Truck 1 real fast. I'm not sure. I think he was on the frequency that was Truck 1 could hear. But Truck 1 now is kind of between a rock and a hard place. They're already on the runway. And so what do? Can they gun it and get off? Well, taxiway Delta, as you can see, kind of goes a little bit at an angle. It's not as straight across. So they would have to turn a little bit onto runway 4 to exit onto Delta. And let's say they hit the gas. It wasn't enough time to avoid Jazz 646, who's landing now and can't stop on the runway, and the collision takes place. Both pilots die in that collision. Why didn't the tower tell the airplane to go around? Well, once he realized what was going on, the airplane was already touching down. So again, air traffic controllers are trained to give airplanes commands. They would give them commands like go around, or a command like takeoff clearance canceled. And then the crew is trained to know what that means, and they will take the appropriate response. The communication with vehicles on a runway, fire vehicles, crash vehicles, so forth, is a little more informal. There are some things that they're trained to say back and forth to each other, but I've listened to a lot of these conversations over the years, even at LaGuardia. And it's usually like, just stop, just go, you know, they're not trained to give a command and know how to respond to it. Now, stop, 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 that's pretty clear. But again, that might not have been the right thing for them to do at that point. It might have been gun it. Well, again, the controller is not, he can't tell them to do that either. At that point, he's just hoping that they're not that far on the runway and somehow the Jazz 646 can avoid them. That didn't take place last night. So it's not feasible at this point in the flight, when the airplane's already touched down, to tell the airplane to go around. That's why no instructions were given to the airplane. Why didn't the truck see the plane? Well, again, it's hard to gauge distances and it's hard to gauge relative motion. So if you see lights out in the distance, it could be a large airplane that's a long ways away. It could be a small airplane that's rather close. In this case, it was a small airplane that was rather close. But unless you're trained to look for that, now most commercial pilots, most military pilots are trained to gauge distances based on that sort of thing. It's much more of an art than it is a science. Trust me on that. There's just points where you have to be able to either look out over the ground and see where you think they are, or gauge what size airplane they are. But remember, they haven't been told that this airplane's coming. So it's very likely that nobody looked out at all. That's the problem with the two different frequencies and the poor visibility that was at LaGuardia last night and the rain-slicked runway. Now let me discuss runway 4, because I talked to you about that just a minute ago. Runway 4 and runway 22 at LaGuardia are interesting, and same thing is on the approach end of runway 13. The rollout end of runway 4, or the approach end of runway 22, is a pier that's built out over the water.
Sending you money for more. What happened?